Thanks, Lucy. And I know I don't look as though I've been in the industry for 35 years, but believe I know I have. Time's short by the looks of it, so I'm going to, in my presentation this afternoon, I'm going to give you a short introduction to Wood for Good, because part of my role in Confor is Director of Wood for Good, and our campaign manager, Sarah Virgo, is sitting over here. So hopefully we'll speak to her later on about what we're trying to achieve there. And then I'll go through an overview of the UK timber resource and supplies chains. I was going to touch on the global manifesto that we've been involved in, but there's not enough time, so I'll probably just dump that. Okay, so Wood for Good, I think Stephen mentioned already, is very much a generic, okay, thanks. It's very much a generic marketing campaign for the use of wood. We focus on promoting the design elements and the biophilic side of things. And most of our main focus over the number of years has been on this carbon benefits. The campaign is co-owned by Swedish Wood and Confor, and has been mentioned earlier. That's mainly because Swedish Wood put a lot of timber into the UK, and that's because we don't have enough in this country to supply ourselves. As part of our kind of COP26 service, Sarah's brought together an interactive map so that illustrates where all the activity is happening in COP as far as forestry and timber. So if that's interesting to you, pop onto the Wood for Good website, and you'll be able to see where there's good examples of use of wood and where the activities are. We have a website, as you expect, with all the usual stuff. It's got case studies, animations. We've also got a life cycle analysis database with data for about a dozen or 15 sort of generic wood products. And that really is to provide a service to people who want to create EPDs. So that's a kind of shortcut. So we've put a lot of money and effort into that, and we're in the process of updating. We'll also do things in Scotland, like we promote we celebrate the design of wood in Scotland, and we have RIAS awards. And on occasions, we also do special projects like this Modern Timber House publication, which you'll see copies of in the foyer. For the last year or so, we've specifically focused on the carbon benefits of wood. And as you'll see here in the different banners at either side, our focus is on being very simple factoids about the kind of carbon benefits of forestry and wood. I'm not going to run through them because you can easily read them yourself, and time is short. So that's Wood for Good. So now let's look at and focus on the timber supply chain in the UK. But let's look at the whole global situation first. So drivers for future wood, it's no rocket science. It's Westwood population is forecast to increase from 7.8 billion to 10 billion by 2050. Societies are becoming kind of more wealthy and healthy and urbanised, therefore there's greater demand for housing. And housing means more use of wood and wood products. And of course, well, in COP26, we're seeing the fruits of this. It used to be, we were promoting this, but now it's a fact that sustainably managed forests and wood in construction is good for climate change. So there's going to be huge demand, and it's been forecast that demand for wood is going to double or even triple, as the WWF said in 2015, for wood across the world. Now that is fantastic if you're in the timber industry and you're a forest owner, or is it? Because if you think about it, from a UK perspective, we are the second largest importer of wood products in the world, believe it or not, only second to China. 80% of our wood products we use are imported. So if competition is going to increase and increase by 2050, are we really going to get access to that material? So we're really going to have to invest more and more to grow our own material. And when you look at the kind of forest cover, Europe is 46%, UK is only 13%, so you can see why why we're in a position where we have to import material. Now on the table there, just one or two figures to take note of, and I'll refer to them later on. So sawnwood, we imported over 7 million cubic metres this year, or sorry, I should say 2020, and we imported over 3 million cubic metres of wood panels. So that 13% wood cover in the UK, even that, only 50% of that is softwood generating. The other 50% are broadleaves, and they're managed more for habitat management, etc., rather than timber production. So we actually only got, well, it's not even 7% cover that's given us productive forestry. What does that equate to in hectares? There's over 3 million hectares, but again, as I say, only 1.4 million of that is actually focused on softwood. 700,000 hectares of that is publicly owned, so that's what you used to know as the Forestry Commission, manage a lot of that. And then another 900,000 hectares is private sector. And the reason I brought that up is because that impacts on when the material comes to the market. The private sector will only put that material on when prices are right. And therefore, it's difficult for the wood industry to forecast exactly how much timber is coming to market in any year. So these have created, all these circumstances, global demand, etc., have created new drivers for investing in woodland and timber in the UK. As you know, the UK government have announced that they are going to plant 30,000 hectares more every year by 23-24. What we're focusing on is asking them to consider, if you're going to plant 30,000 hectares, make sure there's a good percentage of that that's going to give us productive output so that we can store more carbon in buildings like this and substitute higher embodied energy products. From an economic perspective, there's opportunities to onshore manufacturing that already happens overseas. You see examples here, CLT, and now we're moving hopefully to producing it here rather than overseas. There's a machine here that can produce wood fibre insulation, and there's another opportunity for us. So let's look at that and let's take advantage of it and reduce our reliance on imports. There's also non-construction potential as well that's happening elsewhere, and that's biorefining, and that may be something we'll be looking at in the future, where we're breaking down these trees to give us other products, petrochemical-based products to replace that. And even things like clean hydrogen, believe it or not, you can make from wood. You just have to make it cost-effective. So looking at the overall inventory of woodland area in the UK, this is a pie chart really just giving you a breakdown of the species. That's broadleaf and conifer. The kind of quarter there, the chunk, is Sitka spruce. But the reason I put this up is it's just to illustrate that really, when I'm talking day-to-day forestry, people talk about monocultures. Well, that illustrates we don't have monocultures across the UK. We might have it in patches in the hill, but overall we've got quite a breakdown of species. And in the forests in the UK at the moment, it's storing about 1 billion tonnes of carbon. But when we come down resolution to conifer species, even so, 50% of those conifers are spruce, and the other 50% are made up of pines and larches and Douglas fir. The key thing here is about planting the right tree in the right place for the right purpose. And the reason we plant so much spruce is it's very productive, but it'll also grow anywhere, whereas a lot of these other species have to be very specific sites. So, for example, spruce will have a rotation length of about 30 years now, whereas pine is about 80 years. And spruce will give us 800 cubic metres to the hectare, whereas pine in some places only give us 250. But there is a place for these other conifers, and they're very important. But it was really just to give you a reason why we do focus a lot on spruce. Overall, calculation was made in 2015, that there's about 360 million cubic metres of softwood standing at that time. I've put these graphs up really just to illustrate. So the top left-hand graph is basically the production levels, what's being felled each year in the UK. And our forests are very, very young. It's not like Canada, where we've got these old forests. These are all plantation forests that have been planted over the last 50, 60 years. And as you can see, only in the last 10 years, really, 15 years, we were moving up to 9, 10 million tonnes of timber per annum. Before that, it was 3 million, and that really didn't give us the opportunity to engage with the construction sector. And just by way of comparison, the other graph is the hardwood production in this country, which is down well below a million tonnes, and most of that goes to firewood. So the next graph I'm going to show you is the one on the left here. That is basically a forecast of the wood fibre availability from our softwood forest for the next 50 years. The marker there, the kind of purple marker, illustrates 2019, and that illustrates what we actually felled, what we harvested from that potential. So it shows you there's a gap there where there's plenty of timber we're leaving. That forecast is based on the sustainable cut that we can take. So that illustrates we're not even taking that at the moment. Some of you, or certainly some of our timber industry colleagues, are a bit alarmed when you look at the drop from 2030. So it's forecast to rise up to about 18 million cubic metres available, and then drop down to about 12 by around 2045. That's a bit alarming. But we're due a new forecast in the next month or so, and I don't think that's going to happen, and I'll explain why. Because for the last 20 years, we have been planting what we call improved Sitka spruce. This was a massive breeding program that took place where we identified all the best performing families and bred from them. So it was the fastest growing, the lightest branching, and the density as well. And we've just got into crops that are 20-year-old in the last few months. And it's illustrating on that right-hand side there where you see the yield class limits there. Our usual models we use are yield class 6 to yield class 24, but these new crops are already showing yield class 44. So that's been taken into account in the new forecast, and that's why I'm projecting that there'll be actually more fibre available than we thought, and also that drop will not be in that place. That's what I'm projecting. I hope I'm right. Okay, this is a bit of a busy slide, but again, it's really just to illustrate to you where all the markets are for our material. So when we cut that 1,000 cubic metres from the site, 600 of it, that's the large proportion and the large diameter of the tree goes to the sawmills, and that's broken into material for the construction, pallet and fencing markets. And there's a small percentage at the moment goes to engineered wood products, etc. Hopefully that will change in the near future. When you cut a round bit of wood into square bits, you get chips, you get sawdust. That can represent about 35 to 40% of the material. And that feeds the panel board, it feeds the paper industry, and it feeds the energy industry as well. Many of our new wood processing facilities actually use that sawdust to burn, to then, as like a circular economy, circularity, to feed their kilns that heat and dry the actual sawn wood that's graded for construction. The smaller parts of a tree all go to panel board and paper. And yes, for the last kind of 10 years, the wood energy market has certainly grown. That's through government incentives. So it's about 2 million tonnes is burned for electricity at the moment. And there are companies were trying to find ways as efficiently remove what we call the brash in the top. So that's all the branches and the stuff that's left after harvesting, and burning that too. What's missing from that particular slide, and I'll put it in the future, is a new stream that we have to be aware of and make much more use of, and that's recycled wood. Because timber it may be sustainable, it might be renewable, but it's still finite. So what we are looking to do is to extend the life of every bit of wood we can, and therefore many of our wood industry units are now looking to use recycled wood. And in fact, our panel board industry uses huge amounts. So it gives that piece of wood extra life, extra life. So you might have a pallet wood, piece of pallet that lives for 10 years, it gets repaired and repaired. It finally goes to disrepair. It can go into the panel board industry, go to panels, into a house, stored for 100 years, storing all that carbon. It's certainly been, when I showed that graph about the kind of rise in the production of our forests, that's been reflected in the investment that's happened in this country as well. And there's more than £500 million being spent in what I would call world-class wood processing facilities. And that one in the slide there is what is now called West Fraser. You previously knew it as Norboard. That makes OSB. And they've had about £135 million invested in it in the last 2 or 3 years. So they certainly see a future in UK forestry. Focusing on the construction products, this is a kind of table showing the last 3 years' production of sawnwood from our sawmills. This in 2020 is the latest figure we have. We produced over about 3.3 million cubic metres. That's down in previous years, but it kind of reflects the impacts of COVID. When you take that sawnwood and look at the markets that is serviced by it, in 2020, there was actually quite a little dip. So in that yellow band is the construction side. So if you look at the far right, you'll see only 27% of the sawnwood this year went to the construction industry. 43% went to fencing. But that reflects lockdown, everyone doing their gardens, everyone wanting to renew things. So that was where the demand was, so that's where the timber went. And just for completeness, we also produced about over 3 million cubic metres of panel board, OSB and chipboard and things. So we've spent a lot of money understanding the trees that we grow in this country. And if you want to know what's about Sitka spruce, Scots pine, the conditions we grow it in, what you can do with it, you can certainly find these brochures in the Forest Research website at those links. But it has enabled us to focus a lot on what is the structural capability of our species. And this slide really just illustrates that what we have found in this country, all our species certainly produce 100% C16 graded timber. Some of them will give you C24, but you have to break that out. But in general, it's C16, and that's why we've tended to produce only that. But again, that is fit for purpose. Because spruce is so predominant, we have looked at that even closer. So you look at 3 characteristics to grade timber: strength, stiffness and density. And we found that British spruce has actually got, let's just say, greater characteristics than C16 for strength and density. So Napier University helped us understand that more. What's the point? So what? So it's got a density greater than C16. What can we do with that? Could we use that as marketing? Can engineers use that? So we did a few studies, but here's one just to illustrate. This compares creating a Belfast truss from using normal C16 to C16 plus. And then the guys at Napier came up with the calculation that if you use the C16 plus, you could save 47% of the metal fixing. Sorry, I've got that jumping about here. 47% of the metal fixings, and you could save 34% on sector dimensions. So these are the kind of things we have to get across to engineers using homegrown timber. It is actually used. I mean, people talk about, oh, we need to get more homegrown into construction, but it is used in large numbers. All that panel board goes in, all the C16 material that we produce. Actually, maybe not a lot of it goes to new build, but it goes to repair, maintenance and extensions and things. But there are companies in the new build sector that do use it. This is examples of 2. Alexander Timber Design, who produce over at times over 1,000 frames per annum. They supply the mainstream builders. And then we've got companies like Makar Construction, who are more kind of niche, and like the bottom left here, and they're using not just spruce, but all the other species as well. So they do exist out there, and I've also heard from Stuart Milne earlier that they're using that material too. So it is used, it's just maybe not at the scale that we would want or expect. But again, for me, I'm not really interested in replacing imported sawnwood with homegrown sawnwood, because we illustrated that our demand is much greater than we'll ever be able to produce. So what I'm interested in, what we're interested in, is adding value to the fibre that we grow in this country. So in my previous role, I worked for Scottish Forestry, or Forest Commission, as you would know it, and I commissioned a lot of work through Edinburgh Napier University, then latterly working in partnership with the Innovation Centre to look at where can we add value to homegrown timber. And we focused in a lot of areas, but these are kind of 4 recent areas. Can we use more homegrown in off-site construction? We mentioned earlier that I think someone called it the elephant in the room, but retrofit, that's where we really should be looking at using wood and wood-based materials. So we had a look at the opportunities there. And the other one is wood fibre insulation. Why are we importing air from Poland and Austria when we can manufacture it here? And we've got a machine here to test that. And so we do actually have an active project that's looking at that now. And of course, the big sort of sexy topic of CLT that's been going for a number of years. And earlier when Andrew was talking and showing you photographs of his first building, well, it was only a year or 2 after that, someone, a chap called Peter Wilson, came to me and said, Andy, we need to be doing this with homegrown. And I looked at my laptop and see if I had a photograph to show you. So we immediately went to Napier, we created a project, but it really was real Heath Robinson to begin with. We were using an old press in a farm shed, but we did create CLT and we did testing. And then eventually we got this fantastic facility that has enabled us to manufacture and test, if you like, industrial scale CLT. And you're going to hear a lot more about that in the next speakers. So finally, and in conclusion, hopefully I haven't taken up too much time. So UK is the second largest importer of wood products, fact. Global demand for wood products is forecast to triple in the next 30 years. Therefore, this country has to act, and we have to plant more, and we've been told we are. We're going to plant 30,000 hectares, but we have to make sure a good proportion of that is productive material. There's opportunities, we're seeing that, for onshoring manufacture and creating new jobs, and that's going to enable us to store more carbon and substitute more higher embodied energy products. And for me, we have to put more effort into the reuse and recycle of wood, because eventually we're not going to run out of it, but it's best practice to extend that life. So overall for me, the outlook for the UK timber industry is pretty bright, and working in partnership with the Innovation Centre and Edinburgh Napier is going to help us get there. Okay.
Excellent.